Hi, I'm Tony Krumlisk. I posted videos on the most used chords and the most used strumming patterns. This post is about the most used chord progressions. A chord progression, or a pattern, is where two or more chords are played one after the other. You regularly find these progressions in songs of all kinds, and being aware of them can make it a lot easier to both learn and remember songs. Lots of songs use the same chord progression throughout the song. Some use it for just a part of it, and spotting them helps to see this group of chords as an entity. It's like reading a whole world rather than the separate letters that make it up, or a whole sentence rather than the separate words that form that sentence. First, a reminder that you can build a scale starting on any one of the 12 notes used in music, giving 12 possible keys. And you can build a chord, major, minor, diminished, augmented, on any one of these notes of that scale. There are, of course, lots of different scales, but the most common by far is the major scale, and it has just 7 notes. If you give each note of that scale a number, 1 to 7, usually shown in Roman numerals, then you can describe a chord sequence in numbers rather than names, and then apply that to any one of the 12 keys. For example, C is chord 1 in the key of C, and F is chord 4. But in the key of F, F is chord 1, and B flat is chord 4. And so on. I confine myself in this video to just 3 most common ukulele keys of C, F and G, but everything here applies to all 12 keys. The chords and each note of a major scale have different levels of importance. The chord built on the first note of the scale, which is called the tonic chord, and it is the most important, and it's also the chord that the song almost certainly ends on, which is a good way of knowing what key a song is in. The next most important chord is the one built on the 5th note of the scale, which is a V in Roman numerals, and it's called the dominant note. This chord frequently has an extra note added 7 letter names higher from the dominant note. You'll find that note is 1 tone below the tonic. The distance is called a minor 7th, and this makes a dominant 7th. Lots of songs can be accompanied by just these 2 chords because they include almost all the notes of the scale. The 4th note is missing, but that note is also the dominant 7th, so it's covered to some extent. On my YouTube side, I've got a list of 20 songs that can be accompanied by just 2 chords, 1 and 5/7. In the tutorials, I've used the easiest keys of F and C7, but any chords 1 and 5/7 will do. C and G7, or G and D7, or A and E7. The song will sound higher or lower, and there are thousands of songs that only use these 2 chords. It's very important to understand the power of these 2 chords. Whenever you see a dominant 7th chord, there's a strong possibility that the next chord will be 4 letter names below or 5 letter names above. It's not inevitable, but it's highly likely. And those 2 chords are also used as a form of musical punctuation point called a cadence. 5/7 to 1 is called a perfect cadence, and it functions like a full stop marking the end. Definitely the end of the song. Chords 4 to 1 also form what's known as a plagal cadence, and this also sounds like the end, but in a lot less assertive way. You might recognise it as also the chords for Amen in Christian hymns. Incidentally, there are 2 other chord forms of cadences. 5/7 to 6 is called an interrupted cadence. For example, leaves you feeling of not quite having finish. You're sort of left up in the air. And the imperfect cadence is where you end with chord 5-7, like a question mark. Again, feels incomplete. You're waiting for something else to happen. Chord 4 is the next most important chord, and chords 1, 4 and 5-7 are the basis of very many songs, especially traditional songs, children's songs, and those from the 50s and 60s. Lionel Bart's musical Things, or Things, ain't what they used to be, has a song which includes the words, "We used to have stars playing guitars, backing themselves with 3 chords only." 1, 4 and 5-7 are those 3 chords, and they're often the first chords people learn to play. Musicians call it the 3-chord trick. Examples of 3-chord progressions include CFG, or F, B flat and C7, and you can play the 3-string version of B flat if that's easy, but don't play string 1. So you got, and G, C and D7, G, C and D7. That's the Hawaiian version, or you can play the D7 here. The next common pattern of chords is ubiquitous. I mention it all the time. 1, 6, 2, 5, 7, or 1, 6, 4, 5, 7. In the key of C, that would be C, A minor, D minor, G7, or C, A minor, F. In F, it would be F, D minor, G minor, C7, or F, D minor, and in G, it's G, E minor, A minor, D7, or G, A minor, A, D7. Notice in the key of C, chord 6 is made up of the notes A, C, E, and chord 4, the notes of F, A, C, so they have 2 notes in common, and the one can often be substituted for the other, same in other keys. Note also that in using Roman numerals, major chords are shown in uppercase and minor ones in lowercase. Building chords naturally on the notes of the scale produces major chords on 1, 4 and 5, and building them on chords 2, 3 and 6, or notes 2, 3 and 6, naturally produce minor chords. Chord 7 is diminished, we won't talk about that here. However, be aware that composers often change major to minor or minor to major, and they also often make chords to pretend dominant sevenths, which are called secondary dominant sevenths. So the 1, 6, 2, 5 sequence often becomes C, A7 instead of A minor, D7 instead of D minor, or F, D7, G7, C7, or G, E7, A7, D7. So all the chords have become pretend or secondary dominant sevenths. These patterns are ubiquitous. You find them everywhere, from Richard Rodgers' Blue Moon in 1934 to Ed Sheeran's Perfect in 2017. There's a very short list of examples in my tutor for absolute beginners, and I always try to point out this pattern and other patterns in the tutorials that I do. There are lots of other patterns used in songs that you might spot. 1, 5, 6, 4, for example. Or 1, 3, 4, 5. And there are lots more. I should perhaps also mention that the much longer chord sequence of the 12-bar blues, which is also the basis of many songs, not just blues, that's dealt with elsewhere, including in my tutor play ukulele. As I said before, these sequences and thinking in terms of groups of chords rather than individual chords can make both learning and remembering songs much easier. Even noticing when the expected pattern does not materialise can be useful. There's a lot here to digest, I know, but if you feel out of your depth, it might help to look first at 2 videos I made called The Basic Resources of Music Part 1 and Part 2, which gives some music background and an explanation of how chords are built. Well, whatever you do and how you do it, I hope you've enjoyed this, and have fun. Don't get too bogged down in theory.